9, authorize staff to prepare a request for proposal RFP for appraisal services for the potential acquisition of water companies and other town-related services as needed. Mark Puckett will be providing the staff's report tonight. Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. The recommended action before you tonight is to authorize staff to prepare a request for proposal for appraisal services. This action would direct staff to prepare an RFP and or request qualifications from firms to potentially provide professional services for property appraisal and acquisition services. These services may include professional services for appraisals of public or private property, possibly including Apple Valley Rancho's water company, acquisition of right-of-way, public or private property, including easements, utility easements, and valuation of utility distribution and collection systems. Requested appraisals may include valuation services using a variety of accepted appraisal valuation methods or approaches to determine value. To the extent that staff proceeds, if authorized, to develop an RFP and pursue the entering into contracts with appraisal services, to the extent that the cost of those services exceeds the authority of the town manager, a staff report would be brought back to council for consideration at a future council agenda. That concludes my staff report, and staff is available to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mark. I know Councilman Nassif, you had talked about this issue a number of times before, and I'm assuming you probably have questions of staff.
Yeah, just to clarify, and I don't know if the attorney may be able to speak to this, but I know the Carlisle Group is actually the owner of, which would be Park Water, which is the owner of Rancho's Water. So, you know, it's moving forward. You know, I know that, and I've heard, and I think I've seen a letter to this state, and maybe the attorney confirmed this, regarding the sale of the investment group from Carlisle. Is this would be part of the appraisal process, or the reason for the appraisal process to moving forward? And the other issue is regarding the full, if we're going to go out and look to hire an appraiser to look at this, do they look at just Ranchos, or do they look at what's going on in Missoula, which they're further along in the process than we are, and I'm not sure what stage they are, but I think they are also looking at purchasing part of the Carlisle Group, or going down that path. So would this factor into the appraisal process with what's going on with Missoula, and would that factor in the fact that they are for sale moving forward? I guess that's the two questions I have. I don't know which, you know, because I know it's kind of, we're not at that point where we're actually hiring somebody. We're just looking to put out an RFP, but part of the RFP would probably include that information, I would think, you know, coming back to the council with how they would, you know, factor in the cost factor.
Council member, I'll partially answer your question, then, and perhaps if the town attorney John Brown would like to add on to that, or the town manager Frank Robinson. But the action before you tonight is just to approve the preparation of an RFP for appraisal services, if in fact we deem that there is a need for us to enter into an appraisal service contract or bring forward a recommended contract with an appraisal services company. So that's the only action before you tonight, is to consider the preparation of the RFP. Beyond that, certainly part of the process as we look at this, as we look at the need for appraisal services, would be to value, to come to some understanding of what the value of those assets are, so that we could determine whether or not there was interest in proceeding any further. So that's the action before you tonight is simply to consider the authorization to prepare an RFP for appraisal services. And with that, I'll, if either the town attorney or the town manager has any
I think
comments.
that's a terrific summation of what you're being asked to do tonight. Any future decision, if the council wish to do so, to, for example, once this RFP is responded to and you have a desire to undertake a formal appraisal for any of the kinds of assets identified in the staff report, including Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company, that would have to come back, as Mr. Puckett said, to the town council. It might be helpful just to, there are so many moving parts here, to briefly kind of summarize where we are in this soap opera. The Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company is in part one of the assets making up what is called Park Water Company. The other portion of those assets is Mountain Water Company, which provides the same thing in Missoula, Montana that Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company provides to our town. The third principal asset of Park Water Company is a series of services down in what we all would refer to as South Central Los Angeles. So there are three components to Park Water Company. Missoula, Montana has in fact formally initiated condemnation of Mountain Water Company, and that's presently in front of a judge in Missoula. Their laws are a little different there in terms of condemnation, but they're at the stage of arguing whether or not the public necessity would dictate that there's a greater public purpose to be served by the town of Missoula owning Mountain Water Company than Mountain Water Company being owned by Park Water Company. At one point, there was an offer by Missoula, Montana to purchase Mountain Water Company, which was rejected by Park Water Company. And just to further confuse the fact, all of you are aware of the fact that Park Water Company is owned by Carlisle Infrastructure, which is part of Carlisle, which is a multinational investment banking firm based in Washington, D.C. The California Public Utilities Commission, as part of the current rate increase application having been filed by Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company, has received a letter from Carlisle Infrastructure indicating that they are prepared to sell Park Water Company. Well, as you might imagine, that has generated the town council's interest in connection with some recent closed sessions where we have discussed the rate application proceeding and exploring whether or not, for example, Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company might be for sale. We know that Missoula, Montana's offer to buy Mountain Water Company has been rejected formally by Carlisle. And then the other options that are available to the town council to consider as appropriate and as the town council deems necessary would be to initiate a formal appraisal to determine how best to arrive at some determination as to what the value is. And of course, under California law, a formal appraisal could also be used as a future basis for initiating our own condemnation action. But none of those decisions have been made or presented to the town council at this time. The only thing involved here is a decision to hire an appraiser.
Councilman Nassif?
No, that's great. Thanks. I appreciate that.
Okay, thanks, Barb.
It seems that controlling our destiny is vital to the survival of this community. And as we talk about Missoula, Montana, and the sisterhood, actually, we have this correlation. I think it's important that we understand what's going on in Missoula and how it affects our community, being the same company. I read an article today from Missoula that did not indicate that Carlisle was backing down in any way. It was a court issue, but so we don't know what the full story is that's going to affect our town, certainly. And how important is it for us to understand? It's vital for us to understand. And I think the first step in this may be via a citizen survey. How important is it to you that we take these initial steps? Because this is a tremendous venture. I think communities that own their own water and their own municipalities benefit from that, but there's a lot more to this story than just easily taking control. There are a lot of other communities that are working towards municipalities. That we know. So now we know, Mr. Brown was shared with us, that they are for sale, that there is an intent. That is good news for our community. I'm happy to see that we're in correlation and had some conference with Missoula, and I would encourage our staff, our town manager, to continue that work to see how it will benefit our community. At the end of the day, I think any time we can save is going to benefit all of us through what they've gone through in the last 2 or 3 years. I think the research and the evaluation is critical at this point. And Mr. Attorney, I have a question that, do you get a sense that if we work with Missoula, as I just stated, my sense, but your legal opinion, if we work with Missoula, that we get a little more leverage maybe because it's the same company, even though it's different states?
Well, I don't pretend to be an expert in international investment banking firms. They operate in a whole different environment than we operate our town. I think the best answer I can give is that if something is for sale, and if 2 upstanding, financially secure and sound municipalities are interested in buying it, it seems to me that that would be attractive to me if I was Carlisle Infrastructure.
The leverage question. You don't have a real opinion on 2 states or two communities coming together that.
Well, if I was trying to sell something and 2/3 of the system making up that asset were being either looked at in terms of value or being condemned, I would think that might persuade Carlisle to.
That's what I wanted to hear. Okay, thank you. That's my input. I'm really excited about the opportunity, the door that's opened for us, really. And leave it in your good hands. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you so much. So, do you have any questions of staff at this time regarding this?
Just, I think they've answered most of the questions. I think what the public needs to realize is as we had a presentation here on the leadership here, not only the council but everybody at staff, when you hear news like this, you prepare for anything, and I think the leadership has directed us, as well as taking their own initiatives, to make sure that we're in a position for whatever what must come our way, that we're prepared. This is an information time. This is the time where we gather all the facts, put them all down, and then with a survey that was just mentioned, we'll know what the general public really wants, and we will move forward with that particular idea that has come before us. So I just want the general public to realize that, and I think there's been some great comments. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I comment that, it's when the opportunities come up and you have the leadership we do have on this town council to move forward with this, it's a great opportunity. I mean, we had a big flowing of people at the rate increase, and we have a lot of interest in trying to stabilize instead of having all these increases year after year after year of the water, and it makes it frustrating for the residents in Apple Valley and investors to come invest into our town, knowing that the water rates are so high. So I mean, just getting this, getting the appraisal and getting this stuff done is part of what we do as a council to help the community. So thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Mark, I do have 2 questions. I'd like to know, when we put it, because what we're doing here is we're looking at a request for proposals. So staff is going to prepare a request for proposals. We're going to put it out. I would like to know, how far out does this go? Where are we looking for a company to come back and do this for us? And what are the timelines that we can expect for a request for proposals? Is this a 60-day, 90-day, how long before we would get some? Because, I mean, you're asking a pretty broad question. You're asking for appraisals, and I'm not sure everybody's going to be willing to give you all the information. There's potentially a lot of digging into information. So 2 questions is, how far out do we go in advertising this? And then do we even have any type of a guess of how long a time period we may be looking at before numbers come back to this council?
Well, certainly, with the importance of this matter to the to the council and to the community, we would want to ensure that we circulated an RFP after its preparation as widely as possible to ensure that we secured the best possible proposals for appraisal services from the best firms available to us. So from that perspective, I don't know that we would necessarily limit it to any geographic region. I certainly don't think that would work in the town's best interest.
I think that's very positive and forward-thinking.
Secondly, in terms of the timing of it at this point, I don't feel that it's appropriate to speak to that timeline because we have a number of considerations that we need to look at before we initiate sending out a request for proposal, and that will dictate the timeline that we establish.
So, and I agree completely. This is, a lot of people say, well, why didn't an Apple Valley engineer or someone get the request for proposal contract? This is a huge request for a proposal. There's a tremendous amount of information that's going to be researched and looked into and then prepared back to the town for review by town staff and then eventually by this council. So I think it's very appropriate in something like this to go out and try to make sure we're getting absolutely the best people possible to make sure we're doing the right thing. And then on timing, I concur. It's going to be difficult to figure out how much time it'll take to prepare the request for proposal and then how much time they'll need for bringing it back. But I think as what we've talked about already, so many things are happening all over, whether it's in L.A. or Montana or here in Apple Valley, so I was just curious if we had an idea on time, but I would ask that, if this moves forward, that you make sure you keep us abreast.
Absolutely.
I have no request to speak cards unless...
So just to summarize, this issue is being recommended to you by staff, and at this time simply would authorize staff to prepare a request for proposals for appraisal services.
Correct.
No determination has been made by the town council as to the hiring of an appraiser at this point or the appraisal of a particular asset. However, the staff is principally recommending this to you by reason of the communication recently filed with the California Public Utilities Commission indicating that Park Water Company, of which Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company is an asset, is potentially going to be sold. And the town staff feels that the town council needs to be prepared for all the alternatives that may result from that process. And I think that appropriately summarizes the matter. Our closed sessions in recent months have been limited, as we've indicated on our closed session agenda headings, to constantly briefing you as to the town's engagement with the California Public Utilities Commission with respect to the rate increase application.
Thank you, John. Do any of the council members have discussion items, please?
No, Mr. Mayor, I was going to ask that we move this item to authorize staff to prepare our RFP for proposal.
I think this is a very important step, and so I'm going to second that motion.
Yep, agreed. He's seconded.
I have a motion and a second, though I'm not sure I needed a motion and a second. But are there any comments from anybody before we move forward?
Nice.
I just think it's so timely, and that it's our responsibility as a town council be as prepared as possible when and if this avenue comes forward to us. So do I need electronic vote, or I do? Okay. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion, please.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mark.